Was a welcome to Overthrow Media, your best place for politics, hip-hop, and life. It is Big Villainous, your comrade revolutionary, dope-ass MC, and international sex symbol. Today, we're going to talk about a theory of resistance called Foco theory when we come right back. Empty souls, those spaces full, so it's time I'm ghosted. Get ghosted, get ghosted. Empathetic to the stated goals, you cool I just ghosted. Get ghosted. Shifting sands like Chronos, holding morbid golden. I see ghosts, just ghosts. Tipping hands of madmen, molding moldy corpses. I see ghosts, just ghosts. So, I guess you guys are wondering what Foco theory is. So, Foco theory is the idea that you can maneuver small cadres to cause division and rebellion in a standing army. Originally coming from mobilizing from rural areas to attack the central areas. By having the small groupings, you're able to sow division as well as be flexible and maneuver. By doing that, you will then inspire the population to then rise up into resistance. I want to start with something, kind of why I moved away from Foco theory. Foco theory was highly popularized by Che Guevara and one of the most powerful components of the Cuban Revolution. Some of the reasons I moved away from Foco theory, because for me, a long time, I put a lot of effort and energy into making a small cadre maneuvering around to try to inspire resistance and sow division among the enemy. Some of the things I started noticing that were crucial weaknesses were like the lack of infrastructure. So since it's more a guerrilla tactic than building a full-on revolution, it may sometimes lack structure. You know what I mean? Now, you could practice Foco theory and have structure at the same time, but a lot of times, Foco theory takes a lot of energy and effort as in of itself. It doesn't leave a lot of capacity to then build up the infrastructure that you need to inspire hope in a revolution. One of the things why I felt like it was really effective in the Cuban Revolution is that discontent was already so high with Batista because of how foul they were that it led to the fall of his empire. There was a lot of close calls in that as well. Also, I had to recognize that Foco theory was situationally specific, that it will not work in every different terrain, every different society and background. When I was young, I put so much faith in this theory that I thought could bring about revolution. And don't get me wrong, I definitely had its W's. Well, I'm talking about when Occupy, and we got a small group of people that would maneuver and try to resist not only the police and the state, but those who wanted to assimilate to it that were a part of the Occupy contingent. A lot of folks just wanted to have better jobs without thinking about those at the bottom or thinking about how we're going to make a better society as a whole, and did not want us to have conflict with the police or be militantly resistant. But because of being able to maneuver a small cadre of people, some people that I trusted, and we were able to build up resistance within Occupy, specifically Seattle Occupy, because I heard a lot of Occupies were different, that made it very radical at the end. Because not only were we pushing forward a lot of the theories and things we believed in, and that what we feel and felt at the time will make a material difference in the reality of the most oppressed, but we were also accurately predicting what would happen when the police would maneuver. And because of us sticking so tight together and everybody else being so divided, people kind of were inspired to maneuver in similar ways. But that doesn't apply to every movement. It didn't apply to Black Lives Matter. It didn't apply even to the uprising, because the terrain and the way it functioned was so different than it was during Occupy. But I won't deny that some of the tactics that were derived from Foco theory did still add some aid during the uprising. That being said, it wasn't overall effective. That just speaking of from my experience and the quadres I was a part of. There's also, in a revolutionary standpoint, a high likelihood of it being put down immediately. So when Che and Fidel came over on a boat to Cuba to try to overthrow the Batista regime, they were immediately ambushed and about half of their people were murdered off top. That could have been very well the end for Fidel and Che, but they were able to escape into the woods, into the mountains, and hide among the rural peoples. Another big part of it I think is a major flaw, is it tends towards adventurism. Now, adventurism, to explain, is the idea that Jurassic-inspired actions, big maneuvers, will then inspire people to resist. So for example, a group that a lot of people may have heard of that was an adventurous group was the Weathermen. And what they would do was like blow up buildings and shit like that to try to inspire people to resist. And they interlock but aren't the same thing. You know what I mean? Focal theory is a lot more in depth than just adventurism, but adventurism is definitely a part of focal theory. And adventurism is so often not effective and sacrifices those who engage in it. And don't get me wrong, like when people do it successfully, we should be praised, but it shouldn't be a philosophy that we build our resistance and revolution off of, in my opinion. Now it's time we should probably talk about a couple strengths that focal theory did have, and I think is extremely valuable in building resistance. You know what I'm saying? In the overthrow. That wasn't a plug. I swear, it wasn't a plug. It wasn't a plug. It wasn't. I'm not saying to subscribe or like this video or leave a comment down below, or to go to Patreon and support this channel and building it up in infrastructure as well as on the ground actual resistance. I'm not saying do any of that, but here's my Patreon anyways. The strength of focal theory. One of the strengths of focal theory is it's highly flexible because you're not stuck with a big standing army. Instead, you have a smaller group of people moving around and maneuvering to build resistance in the fight. Because of that, it allows a lot of flexibility that militaries do not have. You can move much faster and be from one place to another quicker. You can spread out, scatter, and come back together even if need be. It has a large space to maneuver in whatever way is necessary because of having less people. You can be invisible when you need to, but loud when you need to. And also, it is very good at inspiring the masses to move because you're giving examples through these small cadres how a small group of people can literally seed resistance and be able to start collapsing the state. And then it inspires other people like, well, if they can do it, we can do it. Now, of course, I would never advocate any type of revolution because, I won't want to violate YouTube's guidelines or advocate anything illegal. But we're just talking about the theory here. I used to be extremely big proponent of focal theory, and I still think it has a lot of value. But because of all the downsides listed first, I kind of pulled back from that. However, I definitely think there's pieces of the focal theory that are still useful as long as we remember the infrastructure is extremely important. I mean, unless you want to go out into the woods and fight a guerrilla warfare against a government, then I guess, infrastructure can come when it comes. I remember a specific situation that taught me a lot of lessons, which I tried to inspire people and was being successful in resisting against the local police, at least verbally and in nature, right? Not necessarily physically, but that led to me being attacked by a group of people on occasion, a really crazy case. Actually, a group of street kids that were then paid by the police to attack me. But you can learn more about that in this video by clicking right up here. That lesson, though, taught me that there's a lot more components than what I was looking at. That it has still use, but it has use within context. And that maybe I should share this knowledge with people. So that's what I'm doing. Because I remember on different streams of the dialectic that's hosted over on a Non-Compete Lives channel that I brought up focal theory and people didn't know what it was. So I thought I'd give a quick breakdown. Man, thanks for tuning in. Make sure to like, subscribe, hit the comments, get in that comment section. And yeah, like I said earlier, get at that Patreon. Build resistance in whatever way you can. Stand in solidarity and build infrastructure to support your people. Mutual aid is crucial. But also remember that resistance, overthrow, is fundamental in being able to build a revolution. If it doesn't have that component, it isn't a revolution. Stay strong. I'm out, comrades. Peace.
Walking through the crease and the cracks of the streets, struggling for some food and a bed to sleep, while trying to cause overthrow. I'm feeling weak, ideology buff.